Well, there's our lean condition. So we'll let it chill down a little bit. I'll load it up with fuel and work from there. But that's actually very characteristic of a saw that has a little low compression. I mean, it'll fire and run. Usually when it's really bad on compression, it won't idle. It's hard to start. Well, that one starts pretty easy because I can get the speed because it has low compression. But once you get a little heat into it, it does things like that. So I'm going to go load it up with fuel, and you know, it's possible that the fuel line's got a hole in it too. So I'm going to go load it up and we'll try it again. Well, that's it. It will not run anymore. So that little bit of runtime pushed it over the edge, whatever the edge was. And like I said before, we're starting out with a low compression saw. One of the things I find interesting is if you look in the oil tank, it's all foamed up. And I have a suspicion that where this saw is getting its air leak and why it's running lean is the case gasket is probably no longer sealing. That's actually two things I've seen with these over time. Is one is exactly that. The case gasket fails because the screws rattle out. And the other is the PTO side seal. And I've seen them pop out. And based on how that was running, I'm going to guess that the reason why it ran lean and the reason why it went to the shop was one of those two things. And the result was scorched in the top end. And I think that we've just done a little more damage to that. So we have a repair job. This is the starting point for the project saw. Anyone know what that is? It's a little bit ragged. Put it in the comments below if you do. Not many of those around. And go get this in the water real fast. Yep, got that chilled down pretty quick. And the beauty about doing it this way is you don't have to tap the bearing into the seat right there, which is actually quite delicate. That's a very thin aluminum with a sharp edge. Very easy to push the bearing right through and crack that. Using the heat method and just dropping it in, it gets right to the end of the pocket without damaging that. And the same with this one, I just dropped it right in. But since that's a steel caged bearing, I can just leave it warm. It'll cool down soon enough. But the other one I prefer to cool down with water. I just drop it about halfway into a little bit of cool water, chill the case down before it has a chance to heat soak into the nylon. But both those bearings are now completely seated at the back of the bearing pockets, which is actually quite important. All right, so we're going to use the Husqvarna tool first. I'm going to use my tool second. All right, since I've done this before, I cut a wrench down to try to make it a little bit easier. But having a little oil on the crankshaft and making sure you hold the connecting rod so that it gets in on the piston side there is actually pretty crucial. And then it's a 17 millimeter wrench. You basically pull it right in. Once the connecting rod gets to the inside of the case there, then you can pretty much release and just start winding it in. And you just kind of wind it down until it stops. That's it. Don't push it, just let it seat, that's it. And then once you've done that, you can just release the tool. And I did that. Try to make it easier. Remember, it's all reverse thread. There's your factory tool. And it pushes on the inside race. And since the bearing is seated properly, because I used the proper heat method, it's fine. This is the 575 case. And we're going to put a saw around this set of cases. This is what we're going to do for fun. So I'm going to do what I normally do. 1184 pretty much everything around the cases. And I'm going to use my tool to push the next, the other half together.
use it this last time, and I think we're going to throw this tube away because it's a little bit gummy. It'll work. Yep. And then once you've done that, get these put in. Make sure you use the steel. Make sure you use these steel ones instead of the plastic ones that came with it. It makes a big difference. And the way I do this is I get it together a little bit, and then I drop the screws right in. And can't say it enough, we don't use the screws to push in with. You just use the screws for alignment. I think I'm going to go one step further and say absolutely do not use those screws for squeezing that set of cases, because all you're going to do is flex the cases, possibly ruin the cases as well, so you don't want to do that. And I push on the case and the bearings in there with mine, right? Right to the bottom. Make sure those things are lined up properly, and they are. And just squeeze it together. That's it. Nice and smooth, and it's pretty much centered. Let's run these down. And you'll notice that the thing is still free. Everything is nice and free, and it is about as centered as it can get. And that's how you assemble a set of cases for a 575 or a 576, pretty much the same. But even for a 572. But a couple of points to take away is by using that heat method, The bearings are absolutely guaranteed to be at the base of their pockets, and that's actually pretty important. If you put them on the crank first and then heat up these cases, there's really no guarantee that those bearings aren't a little bit away from the pocket bases. Number one. Number two, dropping them in that way means you don't stress that thin section right there by trying to tap them in. They just drop in, it's done. So you take away risk in doing that. And if you notice, it's pretty free. There's no binding at all, and I don't have to even tap the crank. And by setting it up against this PTO bearing on the 575 and 576, that crank is centered. It's where it has to be. So I think I'll make that a short video, because I've seen a lot of guys doing a lot of different methods, and so have I. But if you want the most reliable way possible, what I just did here is it. And I don't care whether it's a 572, 575, 576, any of them, you know. Another note, if you push those cases together and this is binding, a couple of reasons why that might be happening is, well, one of the bearings hasn't got to the seat. So you'll see a guy tapping on it, and I'm centering the crankshaft. But on the cases like this, where the crank is sitting up against the bearing the way it's supposed to be, what you're doing when you're tapping it is you're tapping the bearing to the bottom of the pocket, usually the fly side. So I think over the years I've kind of come to the conclusion you got to be a little careful what you see. And not rocket science, but you can make it more complex than it needs to be. So, yeah.